An important part of composing with line, color, shape, value is how you use negative shapes and negative space. And it's really important to understand the difference between negative shapes and negative space to create dynamic compositions in your abstract paintings. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you the difference between negative shapes and negative space and how to use them effectively to get the compositions that you're looking for. Hey everyone, welcome to Whole Artist Mastery. I'm Marianne Mitchell. So I've been a professional artist for 40 years, and I, at this point, really enjoy sharing all the knowledge and expertise I've gained over those years with artists like you to help you grow on your artistic journey. So if you like what you see, you can help the Whole Artist Mastery YouTube channel grow by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much. One of the things I've learned in the many years I've been working with individual artists in mentorship programs is how some artists inherently understand how to use negative space or how to use negative shapes. But rarely do people have a conscious understanding of the difference between the two. And for some, it's really a challenge to understand how to use each one in different ways to get different kinds of compositions, depending on what it is that they want to say in their work. So what I'm going to share with you today is several pieces by current mentorship artists who are working with me. They've all said, sure, go ahead. And I'm going to mention their names for you. So feel free to go and check out their work. Some of them have yet to build websites. So, the most important thing is to take in their work and to understand how they're using negative space, how some of them are using negative shapes, and how some of them are using both to create dynamic compositions. And I'm going to show you some examples of when negative space is being used in a way that makes the composition less dynamic. And the same is true for using negative shapes in certain ways that makes the composition less dynamic. Now, before I go to that, I want to explain to you what I mean by dynamic compositions. And so one of the things you can do after listening to this video is go to the Whole Artist Mastery website, put your email in to subscribe, and you'll get the downloadable PDF introductory guide to the Whole Artist Mastery philosophy and tools and techniques that are key to making strong paintings, and one of which is an explanation of the compositional checkpoints that help you create dynamic paintings. So what does dynamic mean? Well, it means that the composition is allowing your eye to move all the way around the painting, to see every aspect of the painting, every line, color, shape, value, and texture, and have a whole experience of the painting. When some of the elements are falling short of being able to effectively move your eye around, that means that some things are either underdeveloped or being used in such a way that they keep your eye in one place, or your ability to, I guess you would say, lyrically move through a composition is weaker than when it would be if someone was using negative space and negative shapes in a way that allows you to freely move throughout the composition without even thinking about it. So let's get to the work, and you'll see what I'm talking about. This is an ink brush painting by Janet Raleigh, and I'm showing you this because of the placement of the shapes in the entire piece of substrate, which I believe is paper, and how the negative space around the lines is supporting the movement of your eye so that you're engaged both with the white space around as well as the shapes that the lines are creating. In other words, the space around this shape here that she's created is supporting the movement of your eye throughout this composition. If we go to this version, I'm hoping that you can see the difference in that the placement of her lines is in such a place on the substrate that the space here between the left edge and this line and the right edge and this line and the bottom edge and this line and the top edge are random. In other words, the placement of this shape on the substrate, the paper, is a random place. And so the relationship between the negative space and the shape itself is less supportive. There's less of a compositional relationship between the negative space and this shape that's been created with the lines. Again, I want you to see how in this version, the negative space supports your engagement in the entire composition in a dynamic way so that you see the space supporting the shape. So we're going to move on to Mary Ida Compton. And I'm showing you this painting because of the way she has used negative space in a very different way. That the lines are much more free-flowing and the marks that she's made, and yet the space all the way around is acting as a backdrop in such a way that your entire focus is on the lines and the marks and the colors that make up this composition. So what's different about this particular composition is that the negative space is really acting as a backdrop. It's much less a part of the composition and much more of a backdrop to what the actual composition with line and mark and color is doing. This artist is Melinda Sinclair, and what Melinda has achieved here is a very dynamic experience between the movement of her lines and the negative shapes that the movement of her lines are creating. And by having each edge of her rectangle have lines going right to the edge, she is creating these negative shapes that are incorporated with the lines. So there's a very dynamic movement between the small, medium, and larger negative shapes and the small, medium, and wider black lines, so that your entire experience throughout this composition is very dynamic, and you really experience interplay between the negative shapes and what you might call the positive lines. So it's less, in this case, much less that the negative shapes are a supporting actor, and they're much more a part of a delicate balance between the strength of the lines and the strength of the white shapes. This is another piece that Melinda has done that, in my opinion, is less successful in moving your eye around because the negative shapes are all about the same size and the width of the lines are all about the same width. So there's much more of a static experience moving throughout this composition than there is over here, where the movement is very kinetic and very lyrical, moving throughout the entire composition. because in this case, as I said, the shapes are all about the same size and the width of the line are all about the same width, your experience of the piece is much less about movement and much more about a static stillness in the composition. Now, I want to stress that one is not necessarily better than the other. It really depends on what it is that you're trying to evoke in your composition. But the more you understand the relationship between negative shape and positive line, the more effectively you can achieve what it is that you would like to express. This artist is Dodge Bingham, and I'm showing you this piece because of the positive and negative relationships between shape and color as opposed to line and black and white value. So what Dodge has done here is used very bright red to be the dominant color and the dominant shape because of the bright red. And then this very light lavendery pink, depending on how you see color, is being used as a negative shape to support the strength of this very bright, large red shape, which is really dominating the whole composition. But since Dodge has added the this line over here, he's also incorporating a line with the shape and the colors. But this is really a great example of the relationship between dominant color and subordinate color, or you might say negative shapes and positive shapes through color relationships. This is Michelle Childs, and I'm showing you Michelle's painting because actually this is an oil pastel, and I'll go back over and tell you all the different mediums that everyone is using. But I've chosen this piece because she is using line, color, and value and shape all together to create a dynamic movement. So she has high value contrast between positive and negative shape here. Her lines are creating smaller shapes and larger shapes. She also has a more subtle color relationship with darker, more intense saturated color. So this green here is less saturated. This indigo blue here is more saturated. The pink here is more saturated than the green. So just as Dodge has done here, where he's been using more a very saturated red with a less saturated pink, but he's much less about value contrast than Michelle's painting here, where she's using, as I said, the line, colors, and value and shape contrasts to create dynamic movement throughout the entire composition. I also wanted to throw this in. Now, this is a sort of a grainy photograph of a very famous painting that most of us really recognize immediately. This is Vermeer's painting, The Girl and the Pearl Earring. And with a better photograph, you would see that the space around here is entirely black, and his genius in the placement of her figure so that you read the black space around her as a backdrop, but in fact, because of the placement of the figure, it's actually a negative shape. So if I show you all of these together, you can see more clearly how Vermeer, again, has used the black backdrop to be a backdrop to the figure, but at the same time, the placement of the figure in the rectangle is done in such a way that the black background becomes a negative shape. So once again, this is Janet Raleigh's ink brush on, I believe, rice paper. This is Mary Ida Compton, acrylic on paper. This is Melinda Sinclair, acrylic black paint on paper. Dodge Bingham, this is oil pastel on paper. And Michelle Childs, oil pastel on paper. And Vermeer, which I believe this painting is done with egg tempera. So I hope that this was informative for you, and thanks for listening to this particular portion of the video. So I hope you found this helpful for your approach to using line, color, shape, and value to create negative space and negative shapes in your own compositions. And I hope that you found looking at these mentorship artists' work inspiring. If you're ready to make a personal and artistic commitment, if you're ready to invest in your growth as an artist, I invite you to look at the mentorship program page on the Whole Artist Mastery website and sign up for a complimentary conversation, because every single artist who has engaged in one of these programs has truly transformed both personally and artistically in terms of growing their depth of knowledge of how to make strong artwork and their depth of knowledge about themselves and how who they are as a person informs the kind of work that they make. So, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.